long last, here is the video I promised for figuring out different aspects of debt. So this was one of the problems from your questions to get started. And we had some remaining debt over here, like the debt that you started with. And so this cell right here is one that you might be changing. I'm going to make it a certain color. Let's just make it green to make it easy to reference. You have your annual interest rate. That isn't necessarily something you're going to be changing, but your monthly payments might be changing. So let's make that another color, like pink. And then figuring out how much you have at the end of that time was another feature that we were using. So this particular problem was looking at if you had $15,000 in debt to start, that's my green box here, and you had an interest rate of 4.66 here, and it's just the interest rate as decimal, it doesn't have the 1 in front of it, you haven't divided it by 12, this is just the annual interest rate. What would the monthly payments be? So the pink was the thing that we were trying to figure out before. So I'm just making that outline to say that that's the one that we are actually trying to find right now is the pink. So the way we set up the formulas to make this happen, this is just one way of doing it. You take your previous amount of debt and you multiply by the interest. And we were calling this an interest multiplier, and that might be what you make this box over here instead. You can do it either way, either putting the interest rate over here or doing the mathematics here. So if this is already as a decimal, you would take that interest rate, that annual interest rate, and divide it by 12 because you want the monthly interest rate. So annual interest rate divided by 12, and then adding 1 because you are not losing that original balance, you're adding interest on top of it. So it's 100 and whatever percent you actually get once you've divided the annual interest rate by 12. Once you've added on the interest, then you're subtracting your monthly payment, and that's where the 157 comes in. That's the thing that we're testing. So once you have that in, you are dragging that down. We do have 10 years being the what we're looking for here because we were talking about $15,000 in student loan debt. So 10 years is actually going to be 120 months. So that's what I'm dragging down until. I'm dragging down to 120 months. Okay. So I grabbed that. I had started this process, but I went too far. And there's 120 right there. And it was already set up this way, but we can show just doing that dragging. Now, I don't want to have to scroll down to the bottom of this page over and over again. So up here, I can actually call that cell. So if I put in an equal sign and I scroll down to the bottom, notice it goes with me, which is nice. So if I scroll down to the bottom, I grab that 120th cell. Okay, you could do the two of them next to each other, would be fine. But there's my 120th cell. I press enter and I'm back up at the top, and this is the value at the end of those 10 years. So let's say we were guessing and checking this payment. We already know that this is the closest we can get to the nearest dollar, but let's go through this process again. So let's say my payments, I guessed that they were 300. I can see by how big this negative number is that that is far too much of a payment. I would have grossly overpaid by $21,000. My typical approach is to work one place at a time, starting from the left-hand side of the number. So if 3 is too big, I go down to 2. 2 is still too big. I've overpaid still. So then I go down to 1. 1 is now too small. So it's between $100 and $200. So I leave it at 1 because 1 is too small and 2 is too big. So I've gone on the smaller end. And now I'm going to go to the next digit. You can start in somewhere in the middle. You can start at one end. It really doesn't matter. So I could start at, say, 190. That is too much. I could then decrease it to 180. Decrease it to 170. decrease it to 160. 160 is still too much. Decrease it to 150. 150 is too little. So now again, it's between 150 and 160. So I figured out that next place. So now I'm going to go to the third place. And I can start on either end again. Maybe I'll start at 159. That's too much. So I go down to 158. Still too much. 157. Still too much, although very close. And 156. 156 is too little. So if I'm rounding to the nearest dollar and wanting to go over so that I'm not underpaying, I would make this 157. And in general, all I'm really looking for is the nearest dollar on your project. So that was one element we looked at, was figuring out the monthly payments. That's something we've done a lot with the different assignments so far. Another one we've done is, let me take the borders off of this. The other one we've done is figuring out how much of a loan you can take out. So how much house you can buy or how much you can afford of a car. Essentially, just what is your original loan amount? And that's what this box is. This box is the original loan amount. So this $15,000 was what the tuition was for school, if this is student loans. So the tuition was $15,000. You didn't have $15,000 to begin with, so a bank, some lending company said, hey, we'll pay that for you if you give us interest. So that is what's happened here. They're paying this $15,000 for you, and you pay it back to them with interest so that they have some incentive for giving you the money to begin with. And they increase the interest rate in order to minimize the risk of losing money. That's part of why interest rates are as high as they are, though, of course, we also have issues with that. So let's change this into a mortgage payment. Let's say we're taking out a mortgage. We want to know how much house we can afford. I'm going to make this just some arbitrary amount of money, $200,000. And let's say your interest rate is, instead of 4.66%, it is 3.85%. So as a decimal, that would be 0.0385. And let's say you know that you can afford monthly payments of, let's say $16,000, or not $16,000, $1,600. $16,000 you'd be paid off really fast. Okay, so you can afford payments of $1,600, and you've got a 3.85 interest rate. We are talking now about a 30-year loan, which is going to be 360 months instead. And so I need to change this cell to be my 360th month. So I'm going to scroll down here. I didn't go all the way to 360. So we have to fix that. Let me delete that. Let's scroll down here. There it is. I can extend to 360, almost, this way. There it is, perfect. I wish I had done that on purpose. It's pretty good. Let's drag that formula down to 360. Okay. I'm going to go back up here. Here's my cell where I'm putting the end of that so I don't have to scroll over and over again when I'm guessing and checking. It's equal to that 360th month. Okay. Now, when you're trying to guess and check your original loan amount, so now I'm dealing with the green box here, that's what I'm going to be changing. My monthly payments are fixed, my interest rate is fixed. So when I've got this here, if I'm paying $1,600 and I've grossly overpaid, it means I could afford more house. So I'm actually, when this is negative now, I'm going to be increasing my remaining debt, increasing my home amount. So again, I'm going to work one digit at a time. So I had 200,000. Here's 300,000. I still have money left. So we'll go up to 400,000. That's too much. Now I would not have all of that paid off in 30 years. So I'm going to change that first digit to a 3. I go to the next digit. I like to start at 9, sometimes 5. So 9 is too much. I do need to go down now. Try 8. And you can bounce around if you want. I like to do it kind of systematically. Make sure that I've checked everything. Oop, okay. So 5 was too much, 4 was too little, so I start on the next digit. 9 is too much. Getting there. 6, 5, 4, ooh, close. 3, 2, 1. Okay, so now 1, it went from being too much at 2 and too little at 1. So I'm going to go to the next digit. You don't have to start at 9 again. You can start closer. I might start at 5 instead. 5 is too much. So going down to 4. Going down to 3. Going down to 2. Okay, so now 2 is where I'm starting there. So I've got 2, and then I'm going to go to the next digit. Again, I think I'm going to start at 5. Oh, 5 isn't enough, actually, so I need to go bigger. 6. Okay. 7, I'm guessing, is going to be... Oh, no, 7's okay. 8, still negative. Oh, wait. Yes. Okay, 9. I knew that 3 was too much, so 9 must be the highest I can go there. Let's throw a 1 in here and see. That's too much. So I think the lowest or the most we can get is this 341,290. That would be to the nearest dollar for our loan. Because if you go even $1 more than that, so adding again a 1 at the end here, that is now money you have left over that you'd have to pay off. Granted, it's only 21 cents, but that is still money left at the end. So we're going to take that down to the 90. So that's the closest you can get to the nearest dollar for the amount of house you could afford with $1,600 payments and a 3.85% interest rate. Okay, so those are those two things we've been guessing and checking, the monthly payments and the loan amount here. Now, there are other things that you can add in. You can add in an additional amount to your payments. So let's say that I make, and this is my net amount. Let's say that I make, oh gosh, let's just make it $2,000. And that's monthly. Okay. So I make $2,000 monthly, and let's say I want to put an additional 1% of this $2,000 towards my payments. So 1% of my net income is going to be equal to my net income times 0.01. Okay, so I'm adding this $20 on. So over here in my monthly payments, it would be equal to the $1,600 plus my 1% over here. That updates my schedule. So now you can see what happens at the end of 30 years. I have overpaid. So then the key would be, once I've done this, when I add in this extra information over here, what I'm doing is I'm trying to pay off my mortgage faster. The goal isn't going to be to change my payments. The goal is going to be to not have to pay it for 30 years, which when you decrease the amount of time you spend, you're decreasing the amount of interest you pay. That's something that we saw in our homework. So I'm going to scroll down and see at what point my loans are paid off. And I'm just going to go start at the bottom down here. There we go. And I'm going to look for when it changes from positive to negative, which is right here. So it's 352 months I would have had to pay. Something like that, which you don't really save that much time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You save 9 months worth of payments, which doesn't seem like a lot. If you were to change this percent, let's say you put towards that 5 extra percent of your income, which is $100, which for a $2,000 income might be a little bit tough, especially with a $1,700 mortgage payment now. Well, let's ignore that. Let's say you can put an additional 1% towards it. Now we scroll down to the bottom again, and we see how much of a difference that made. That made a big difference. So now it's only taking me 323 months instead of 360 months. If you think about the difference that saved you, it's a little bit under 40 months, but that's close to or over 3 years, I think. So that's a decent amount of time you've saved on paying off your mortgage. So that's putting a percentage towards that. We can take this out, though. And then we're back to our mortgage payments we had before. We can take out the plus G4. Okay. So we had some other scenarios. What if there is a one-time additional payment? So some year you've been saving up for a vacation, and for whatever reason, the vacation falls through, but you still have this money hanging out. So you've got these vacation funds that are unused. And we used an example of $5,000. Let's just say it's $4,000. So you've got these unused vacation funds, and you're only going to add it in once. So let's say this happens at 5 years. 5 years would be 60 months here. So at month 60, you simply take away an additional $4,000. Because you're going to now put that towards your loans. It is taking it away because it's like you're making an additional payment here. So I press enter. That only happens once. Everything else stays exactly the same except for that one-time payment of $4,000 in month 60. So again, I'm checking to see how my payment schedule has changed. Not the amount of that I'm paying every month, just how much shorter of a time period I get to spend paying off my loans. So I scroll down again, and I'm looking for where it changes from positive to negative. There it is. That's $354. You don't save a whole lot of time by putting in that additional $4,000, but you do save yourself 7 months worth of payments. If this happened more often over the course of 30 years, you of course would be saving more and more time. If for whatever reason at 128 months you have an additional $5,000, there we go. You can look at how that changes your schedule down here. Now I'm up to 348. The later that additional payment comes in, the less impact it's going to have on your payment schedule. But you can look at how that impacts it when you have one-time payments or if you have additional put towards your debt. I believe that covers the things we talked about in class. So putting together your formula, which we've been doing with the homework, guessing and checking both the amount you can afford as well as the monthly payments you can afford, making alterations to payments either as a one-time thing or as a additional amount you always put towards your payments. That's the other piece that you're looking at there. But I think that should help you answer the questions you have on your project. If you do find you have other questions, please let me know.